All Things Alice. This podcast will explore the cultural phenomenon of Alice in Wonderland as artistic landmark and global symbol of inspiration and imagination. I'm your host, Frank Beddor, the author of the Looking Glass Wars trilogy. Let's explore, what is it about Alice? Hey everybody, it's Frank Beddor. I'm back with All Things Alice. I'm very excited today because we have a game developer, actually the CEO of Covenant.dev. It's a game development company. His name is Stan Just, and he worked on The Witcher. He was a producer on The Witcher games, but he also has a new game called To the Star, which is an Alice-inspired survival adventure game. So we got to figure out how he blends The Little Prince, Alice in Wonderland, and To the Star, which seems like a sci-fi kind of vibe. So I am super excited to talk to Stan to find out about his Alice inspirations. So Stan, welcome to the show. Tell us about your game.
Hello.
Hey, oh, wow, professional, seriously professional.
I was actually trying to get to the recording studio that we've got here in my co-work, but it was closed.
Well, that's to be expected given the business you're in. So, well, thanks for being on. It's always exciting to talk to another creative person who has been inspired by Alice. And I'm particularly interested in games because, when I first started writing my books and I went to comic book conventions, people would always say, okay, we've read all of your books, but what are you going to do? Like, where can we hang out? And so I got the clever idea of doing a game, but I did it this was so long ago, it was in Flash. And, a lot of people came to it, but I didn't know that I could monetize it, with microtransactions or anything. And so it cost me a fortune, and people were really happy, but I didn't make any money. And then Flash disappeared, 2 years later,
Oh, yeah.
and all that work went in for naught. And so I've had a keen financial eye to watch how people, put games together. And
Well, so I've got a similar experience with my first game that went commercially out like last year because we spent a lot of money and effort on it, but all in all, didn't pay it out, and not many people bought it. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
so basically tough
Yeah,
market.
yeah, I hear it's pretty tough. I also, I also had an agent for a while who worked exclusively in games, and I mean, this is probably 15 years ago, maybe even more. I mean, my book first published, I think it was 18 years ago, and we went to all of the, the Activisions of the world, and I would get in the room and I would pitch a vision of what I thought the world could be in the game. And, in the room, people seemed really engaged. But at the end of the day, if there wasn't a movie first, they weren't interested. And they would say, well, come back to us as soon as you have a Warner Brothers deal. And I was like, well, once I have a Warner Brothers movie, what do I need you for?
Yeah.
So, and Warner Brothers games would have probably wanted to, buy it. It's hard to be independent out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's very difficult, especially in 2023, 2024, kind of a period to be going out and publishing games right now.
So let's talk about your game, though. I'm going to get into your history. I want to hear about The Witcher. Big fan of the TV show. I never played the game, but To the Star, which is we saw in a Google search, it just popped up, and so I was really keen on having this conversation. So you're the CEO of your company. It's called
Hmm.
Covenant.
The Covenant.dev.
Yeah. But just tell us about the inspiration around To the Star. It's a survivor game, right?
Yeah, it's a survival adventure game. It's a survival adventure game which is aimed to be for supporting a cooperative gameplay as well, up to 4 players. And it is a game in which players explore a whimsical fantasy realm, as you mentioned, inspired by Alice in Wonderland, craft bizarre objects in their private brief-based dimension, and fight incredible creatures on their way to the star. And the initial inspiration and the initial idea came from, well, kind of out of the blue, because I was thinking about some game that would be relatively simple in a main objective, and this main objective was the spark, I guess, like the main objective of a star falling. That this is also related and inspired in part by the Little Prince, so that's a combination here. So inspired by the notion of a star falling on your planet and you wanting to get to it, to reach it, and to uncover the story behind it. So that was the start. That was the initial idea, and it evolved after a few months in a sort of combination. Like, all right, so what this star will be about? Like, what kind of environment or what kind of a planet that did it hit? Like, is it Earth? Maybe it could be something different. Maybe it could be something else. And that led me to some, well, ideas inspired by this literature. The reasoning behind, like, or the answer to the question, like, what the star is that, all right, let us go like more fantasy. It won't be a comet like asteroid or something. Like, it will be more whimsical, more fantasy like. Like, let there be a character on it. Let this character have a story. I don't want to spoil too much, but coming from a different planet, and that's a fragment of it, and he just crash landed on our planet, and our planet is again also not normal. It's more whimsical. Because why? Because whimsicality is something cool. It's something intriguing. Whimsicality gives us opportunity as the creators to do something new, to do something crazy, to do something surreal, and be able to easier awe the player. So it would be, if it would be Earth, it would be more, well, grounded and more, well, directed to a different players, let's say, and more boring in a sense that people, seen it all, and there's not much room for surprise. So yeah, like, let's take the story of the Little Prince. So that is a person, a character on that piece of a planet that fell on my planet, and he probably, traveled some way, some in some ways, across the galaxy. He has the stories of his own, and the answer to the second question, what's my planet? Well, my planet has, something up on their sleeve, its sleeve as well. So it is interesting on its own, and just getting to know my own planet as a player is also something interesting. So it was this combination of those two inspirations. I would say there was also a third one, but a minor, because we've got our Polish, I wouldn't say a version of Alice, but something that is a little bit similar in some ways. And that's like Professor's Inkblot Adventures by Jan Brzechwa. And this is also something that I've watched as a kid that absolutely blew my mind in terms of what is possible to imagine. What is possible to imagine. Like, if you're a kid, of course you've got a lot of imagination, but you walk around, you see things, and you operate in a constrained space, in a constrained, beings. And then on a screen in TV or movies, you see that somebody's eating his sprinkles. So he's
Yeah.
eating his sprinkles. It's like, how is is that possible to imagine such things? Like, and it opens your mind.
Right.
Your mind.
Well, now let me ask you about combining Genres. So, you have a fantasy element, which of course is the whimsy, and you have a very sci-fi element with the stars and different planets, and then you have Earth and something very grounded. So when you start to put those pieces together, how do you find the tone that feels consistent in terms of the gameplay, in terms of the storytelling? Because from my creative process, finding different genres and blending them, if it feels fresh and grounded enough that it's not just random, then you feel like you've kind of come up with something new that people can relate to that feels fresh. But if you combine too many things, they bump up against each other, and it doesn't feel of a new form. So when you do your game development,
Yeah,
do you think about that stuff?
absolutely. I absolutely agree because like if you mix too many things, it is just becomes an unattractive blend. Um, so you need to be very careful about the believability of the world, believability of your creations. So, for example, the sci-fi aspect is a very, very limited one in terms of like you usually when you say like sci-fi, many people just like think like technology and like spaceships and stuff, lasers. Like we don't have any of that. So for example, like this vehicle that the for I try to not
The
spoil too much.
character brings,
So it's a
yeah,
vehicle that on which the character
transports,
appears
here.
and falls on your planet is not a like a it's not a spaceship. It's just a fragment of Earth, and there's a character on it. Like there's no technology there. So I think that the audience, the player, doesn't have this feeling. All right, this is a sci-fi technology kind of a thing.
Got it.
No, it's rather a fairy tale, rather whimsical thing, and very you need to have this leap of believability that, all right, so this is a guy that is, traveling on a piece of planet. Like this is this sort of fantasy that we're going for. So that's that. But that's also the most fun part to create the believable world
Mm-hmm.
that is whimsical, so that the player can use this fantasy and believe in it and just say that the atmosphere there is immersive. And even though there are like crazy things happening, it is all within the constraints of your creation. So, for example, if I will tell you that we've got like a creature of a honeybee that is in a form of a jar with wings that flies. Uh, so that's something that we've got, but this creature doesn't, for example, relocate within a light speed. So it doesn't, I don't know, blink, or it doesn't suddenly grow a shotgun and
Mm-hmm.
shoots you.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't fit the
Story.
overall setting.
Mm-hmm.
So he needs to, be heavy, for example, as a jar filled with honey. So he
Mm-hmm.
needs to be heavy. Still, the animation, the movement needs to be believable, even though it's a jar of honey with wings. Like it doesn't make much sense, but still it does make sense in
Right.
some
There's
way.
a logic to the weight, and so you feel that it's not a speedy thing. It has its
Yes,
limitations. Well,
exactly, exactly.
you bring up whimsical aspects a lot, and Alice in Wonderland, to some people's mind, is really a whimsical story because there's a lot of absurd things that happened, and but at the same time, in Alice in Wonderland, there's a lot of people can interpret it as very dark and nightmarish because you're out of control and you're shrinking and you're growing, and the people there and the characters there are not of our world, and so depending on your point of view, your interpretation of Alice, the whimsical aspects of it, did you see it as fantasy? Did you see dark elements? And then which elements did you blend in? Specifically, what was inspirational for the game?
That's a very interesting question. Like, I think that We will use also some scarier elements, I would say, to a degree, because we are still targeting a relatively young audience, so 10 plus in age. So we do not want to use a lot of or like very significant fear themes. That said, like even if I like watch animations with my 5-year-old, it's also happening in movies like Disney movies or animations that there are some fear themes in order to just show this. They're oftentimes very useful in storytelling in order to just show that there's a threat, there's a challenge that the protagonist needs to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that this is useful in this way, and also in games which rely pretty heavily on the notion of challenge. It doesn't need to be always scary, but if the challenge wouldn't be scary from time to time, at least, then if it would be funny, like ha 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 ha, and then you're failing, it would be rather irritating. If something is
Right.
rather scary,
Yeah.
you're feeling, I guess, you're feeling motivated to overcome it. So my point being is that it will be used from time to time, but not this is not something that you will see often in our game. It's either pretty, very visually appealing, I would say, even during the night. So like you. If you Googled it, you could stumble upon our Steam webpage, and then there are some screenshots of it, and we are showcasing there uh, some biomes which have also a night version of it. So the biomes during the day, they are even through some visual effects are even tuned so that they seem fantasy-like or like fairy
Okay.
tale-y or like dream-like,
Mm-hmm.
while during the night they look like Avatar, like similar to Avatar movies, which is also attractive, so that people don't need to be afraid of the dark, for example.
Right.
So we
Right.
do not play on this theme anymore because we we played on this very often in our previous game. So right now we are not using it.
Can you share anything specific from Alice in Wonderland, or is it more the idea of somebody on, in your case, coming in on a star and coming into a world, or Alice falling into a rabbit hole, and then these
Hmm.
quirky characters that show up, and the conflict that she feels as she's navigating this world. So is there, like, for instance, is there a Jabberwock?
Not yet, at least.
Okay.
Not yet, not in the current design. But we are using bits and pieces. So we are using references to either the Alice or the Little Prince
Mm-hmm.
whenever we feel that we have a good idea of how to use it. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, in terms of enemies design, so that's definitely a direction that we will be going for, but not necessarily in a format that you can might expect. So, for example, the rabbit was a very important character, obviously for the Alice, but it was rather a positive one. While we are using the rabbit in the form of a an enemy and a very important enemy that is, and it's even I won't spoil much, but it's in a form of a iron golem,
Okay.
let's
Okay.
say, and it manipulates time, and it has watches incorporated in its body.
Oh,
So we're
okay.
playing on this notion of there's
Okay.
a rabbit with clocks, but it's not, a positive one. It's a scary one, and
And
he
it's
is
part of,
actually a robot with the clock. So it's kind of like blinking towards Labbit, but towards the notion of this character, but not using it, one to one. That will be a white rabbit, will be, carrying a clock or something like that. So we want to be creative about it. We don't want to like just copy paste things.
I love that idea because, it's incorporating elements, but as we just talked about, it has a sci-fi because it's a robot. And so it serves both purposes. It gives you the whimsy of Alice that people will identify with and think it's cool. But it's got the sci-fi bent and take on it. So,
Hmm.
you're talking about the development. Why don't you give us, our listeners, just a where are you in the process? Maybe tell us where you're at in the process right now and
Hmm.
what you're where you're trying to get to.
All right, so we are at the very beginning of the process of the development of the game. So, to put it in the broad terms, you can think about it as you can break the development of a contemporary video game into the concept phase, where you usually just do a lot of thinking and writing, and then prototyping. Then you do a uh, usually go for something that is called vertical slice, so like a very representative fragment of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So the concept, prototype, so a very rough element of the game, then a representative part of the game. Let's call it a demo. And then you go into production, full production, so like doing all the things, all the enemies, all the story, the all the environments, and at the very end, you're just since it's an application basically, you're debugging, so you're
Mm-hmm.
erasing any mistakes that you did along the way before the release of the game. So we are currently after the prototype, but before the production. So we are trying to do this representative bit right now, this demo that will showcase the idea that we've got, and hopefully get some interest from potential investors in order to fund this project.
So the demo is to show off the design and the gameplay. And when you say investors, are you talking about going to publishers, or are you looking for, the, hard money then to move it along and take it to developers? I mean, to publishers
Mhm, mhm,
afterwards,
mhm.
or are you going to be the developer and the publisher?
Yeah, so currently we are considering both options.
Okay.
So since we are a stock option company, we consider issuing shares and raising money through that, or getting a publisher and proceeding in this path.
Wow. Well, as a CEO, raising money and doing a stock option, that's its own beast of a game to play. So,
Yeah, well, I have been there already.
yeah.
So
Okay.
our previous game was also financed actually through like both options, I would say. Like we started with issuing shares and then signed with a publisher.
What was your previous game?
So the previous game was called the Gourd. Gourd, and Gourd is a Slavic fortification, like from ancient times, and that was a strategy game, very dark game based on Slavic mythology that we actually adopted to our needs. We actually wrote the whole mythology around the game before going into it, before well, allowing the player to play through our story. He had an option, and actually, this is posted on YouTube. We have not we he had an option to actually read through our version of Slavic mythology.
Wow.
So that
Wow.
was quite cool.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you do a lot of writing, or did you grow up writing? Because if you're working in these different mythologies, I imagine, and especially in games, I mean, even though it's the gameplay, but there's so much creativity in writing, especially when you're building worlds. Was that something you did a lot when you were a kid and into your adulthood, or?
No, no, unfortunately not. I was always somebody who had a talent to organize stuff. So that's why I became a producer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I started my career. But when I became indie, like independent developer, owning a small studio, I needed to wear a lot of hats. So I needed to learn a lot of things, and I really enjoyed both writing and directing. So that was something that I was really keen on doing, and we even had a nomination a few days ago from Digital Dragons Awards for the best Polish narrative for our previous game.
Oh,
So
congr
that's a quite of an accomplishment for us. I was cooperating with two writers, professional writers, but I was a junior writer and I did quite a bit on that game. So that's a quite of accomplishment for me.
oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Since you're playing in the Alice space, does it ever occur to you why Alice continues to be a muse for so many creative people, whether it's musicians or movies and in gameplay, it's there's so much of it. Um,
Yeah, yeah, there were games there
what
in
do
the
you think? I
space, of
mean,
course.
I mean, there's a lot of adaptations of it. In
Hmm.
your culture, Alice is big like it is in all cultures. Why do you think it translates?
Yeah, I think it's translates or it's appealing at least for me because it really opens up your imagination. Like it's there aren't that many, at least I don't know. I'm not familiar with such creations. There aren't that many creations of literature that actually show so much imagination, and at the same time, they are like believable. They're not like totally crazy, surrealistic things that doesn't make any sense. It's still believable and very appealing in that manner, I would say. But from also utilitarian standpoint, as I have to emphasize, as a game creator it is very practical to have such a setting because it is because then you can allow yourself to do a lot of strange things and it still fits in the setting you've chose because not all the settings are like that. Like even if you go with some, especially if you go with realistic setting, you cannot, for example, teleport people or do anything like magical. You are constrained within your setting. So the more open-ended setting you choose, the more weird mechanics you can throw at the player and surprise him. So that's very valuable for
Well,
us.
what about the value of the Wonderland side of it being recognizable, or the value of the Little Prince being recognizable, so that the audience that starts the game is grounded in the beginning? So you have that aspect of it, but then you have Wonderland as a brand, as an IP that's sort of kind of helping position your game as
Yes,
the
yes, absolutely, absolutely. That's a good point on its own because when I'm saying that I've got a game that is inspired by this piece, then immediately people who know it and who like it, they can relate to it, right? And they already know how I'm positioning this product. So that's very, very valuable because if I would say that I'm doing a fantasy game we won't be talking. We wouldn't be talking, right? So,
exactly exactly. Well, yes, that's true. That's true.
so
Um,
that's very valuable. And I've learned that when I was, talking with investors, especially, but also publishers. Like you need to have a short sentence where you explain somebody what's your product about and within a very short period of time like this is this game but in the setting or interpretation of Alice in Wonderland by Tim Burton, especially the movie, and it's immediately all right, this mechanics with this setting,
They understand.
already
They
got it, right?
understand you're taking a brand and you're redefining it for, your own storytelling, and and hundreds and thousands of people have done it, and then it's really going to come down to the execution. And if you execute right, then and you get that tone right and you get that playability right, then the investors can see there's a way of selling it. So it works in all
Hmm.
businesses. It's just.
Exactly.
But Alice seems to have really, as you said, it's a universal story. It's a universal world, and it's been around for so long that we almost forget how often it interplays with our day-to-day life. So why not put it into gameplay? But why did you choose a survival adventure game out of curiosity, genre-wise? Because, you said your previous game was, a darker
Yeah, the previous game was a survival, well, strategy adventure.
strategy
I
adventure. Yeah.
usually called it. So strategy adventure, now survival adventure. So there are a couple of reasons. Like the main genre, if you pick one of those two, would be adventure. This is something that is very close to my heart to do adventure games. Or previously it was a survival adventure or a strategy adventure. Right now it's survival adventure. And so definitely this notion of traveling, of a journey was important for me
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's very attractive, and I had an idea of how to execute on it. And why survival? Well, survival genre in video games is defined right now not necessarily by the fact that somebody is struggling to survive per se, so like fighting diseases or hunger or something like that, but
It's not life and
oftentimes
death.
by some mechanics.
Not life and death is what you're saying. That there's.
Not necessarily, or it's at least not the only element of the definition. If you're talking about game genres, like it gets tricky here. So, for example, if you would ask somebody from the games industry, what's the definition of a survival game? Well, the survival aspect is one thing, but there's also the base building aspect, the progression of the character, or the crafting itself as a core mechanic. That's very important thing. So like the only the mechanic of creating new items, so the crafting is a part of the definition of a survival game for some reason. I haven't, said that, but set that up, but I'm just using it. So like crafting things or like crafting structures and building structures. This is something that is used in survival games. So those mechanics are useful in your journey in order to craft stuff, be better, have better gear, have better equipment. And in our game, you also throw food because Alice had magical food, so we wanted to build on that. And so we use this crafting, we use this base building, and then we figured out we've got a survival adventure game, and this genre is also very popular on our target platform. So that was also an argument why we should go with that. But we aren't going, and I can spoil that, we aren't going in this fight for your life, oh my God, I'm dying kind of a vibe.
Right, right, right. So, as the CEO of a company, you have, the creative aspects that you get to work with your team, and then you have the business aspect. And you mentioned, when you're pitching to investors, it has to be, a couple of lines. So it's the elevator pitch, as people like to say.
At the beginning,
At
at
the
least, yeah.
beginning. What games do you reference as giving them? It's like this game versus this game. In movies, it's like this movie meets this movie.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So, do you have the
So
equivalent for your game that our audience might be able to relate to?
yes, so the main game that we reference is called Grounded.
Grounded.
Fun fact, it's called Grounded,
Okay.
mixed with Tim Burton's interpretation of Alice in Wonderland.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Tim Burton's because we are using a lot of swirly shapes, especially, and this Barton-esque art style, but we wanted to use it in this positive and optimistic kind of a version, not a dark one, not a scary one, because you can go like very Beetlejuicy with Barton-esque, but
Right.
we're not doing that this time. We're going much more positive, and this is also our angle because our little blue ocean, because a lot of survival adventure games are scary, are very
Mm-hmm.
as mentioned, grounded and very down on earth, so that and also scary and very grim, let's say. While we want to, offer to the same audience, but something more positive, something more whimsical, and something more fun, hopefully. So that's our angle.
I'm curious, just because it just popped into my mind about you have a boy or a girl, or what's your kid? Do you have a,
So you can, oh, my kid.
yeah, you have a 5-year-old,
My,
right?
Yeah, yeah, I think I thought about that you will be asking about the protagonist in the game. So that's the customizable character that you can
Oh,
be
well, I want to know
both a
about
boy and
that.
girl.
I want to know about
But yeah,
I do want to know about that because I
I have a
wanted to
boy.
know
I
if it
have a
was a
boy.
girl, if it was an Alice, or if it was, a boy. So because of the prince. So
So I've got a boy, Gabriel.
Gabriel.
Gabriel, but in game the protagonist can be any gender, and
Okay.
there's only a body type, like female
Okay.
body type or male body type, but you can be whatever you like.
Look, but my question is, since you've had Gabriel,
Mhm.
how has your thinking towards games, if any, changed? Has he influenced the way that you think about what he's going to be like
Oh yeah.
when he's 10? Oh yeah, okay. How?
Oh yeah, well, absolutely. In at first, let me start by saying that actually my thinking about indie development actually started when I was preparing to be a father. So, then he got born, and he was born, and that was the time when I was actually doing my first indie game. So. I'm basically like saying that my child is basically being developed or developed. My company is being developed simultaneously to
As
the
your
growth of my child. So
son is growing.
it's going head to head,
Oh, that's so interesting.
basically.
Oh, that's cool.
Um, and it definitely affects me, like as probably any creator, because in my first game, Gord, where we were playing with the fact of so that you are a steward supervising a village of full of subjects, and there was this parameter of sanity. So you needed to provide them with like food and nutrition and housing and etc. But there was also the psychological aspect of their health that you needed to take care of. So me as a psychologist by education, like also I was asking myself like what will be the strongest stressor, or like the most, emotionally heavy thing to do to affect this mentality of your subject. So immediately the death of a child popped into my head. So actually, like I'm getting, a long way, but I'm getting to the point that actually, like being a father affected some of the decisions that I made, like by, for example, implementing children into my first game, or some aspect of the contemporary game, but I cannot spoil that one.
Okay. Okay. Well, yes, I think you're right. I have two children. They're 16 and 18, so I'm a little
Awesome.
further along than you are. But when I was writing my novels, the way that they would see the world and the way that I would tell them stories and the way they would react to these stories and that whole thing you talked about with imagination and when you're a kid and opening up your imagination and then having these really powerful imaginations, that became thematic in my stories and my books as a magic, as a power magic system, because you start to lose that when you get older. Sometimes, the world kind of wants you to fit in a box, and kids, there's no such thing as a box for them. So I was curious. Well, can we chat a little bit about Witcher? I actually have never played the game, but I've watched the shows, and it's very deep mythology and very complex in the way that they also tell the stories using time, different timelines, and then connecting them, which I thought was really clever and something that you can really do now in television. But can you talk a little bit about what your experience with the game, and then have you watched the show? It's a two-part question.
My first question, have you watched the Polish show
Oh, I have not.
from the 90s? So like
Wow, I did not even know that there
that's a
was a Polish show.
difficult thing to watch, but
Oh, okay.
but
Well, how are they different? And
well, there are a lot of similarities, I would say, especially to the first season,
okay.
first Netflix season. But with much lower budget
Mm-hmm.
and capabilities that we had at that
Mm-hmm.
point, still interesting watch. There are those things are on YouTube, I guess, right now,
Oh, okay.
for free. So.
Oh, great.
So yeah, I would absolutely agree with you. Like this, The Witcher, like the books and the games and the show. I think it's very like this creation overall. The franchise is very political. It gets very complex in a way. Like this there aren't there aren't so many main characters as in the Game of Thrones, because you've got mainly like Ciri and Geralt, and you follow them along mostly. But if there were, I would say that it would be in par with Game of Thrones in terms of complexity. Like sometimes I remember my experience when I was playing, especially when I was playing the second installment of the game. And after like 30 minutes, you've got in the dialogues, you've got so many names of regions and so many names of characters that if you haven't, followed the books, you can get easily confused of what's actually happening, and the people are trying to explain you the political dynamics of the world and how it came to be like that in a current setting. So that's not often seen in video games, which is usually, rather an easy entertainment to consume. While when you're just bombarded, like, yeah, this, no nation invaded that because of this, problems. So that's not everything you see nowadays, but
Yeah, you see that in novels because you can read as slowly and you can go back, and so the Game of Thrones novels. But I'm interested in the Witcher game, and why do you think that ended up working? Because it was so complex, and there are so much to carry in your mind to really enjoy. Or were you able
hmm
to,
hmm
if you couldn't carry it all, the playability was still really engaging, and so you had that, because that's a
yeah,
lot to ask of the audience, or of the player.
uh, absolutely. But the games are oftentimes framed in a way that they allow for the player to choose what he is getting interested in and what he ignores. So like if there's a layer like deeper story layer behind all of that, you can get into it and it will be rewarding to you for you. But if you're not interested so much, you can actually just follow a marker on your map and just get to the marker. You just skip the dialogue, skip the cutscenes, just follow the marker, kill the guy, and that's it, and get the reward. And so you can, you can fine tune that to your mood, to your needs, I guess. So that helps. And then there was this like the Witcher genre, especially the games, like also was mm, were framed in a way they had their own USP. Like the USP, the main USP of the Witcher franchise was
Mm-hmm.
the choices and the consequences. So that was I'm not sure whether it was the first game that did that to such extent, but we tried. I can say we because I was working on the third installment, but we tried to make a game where you felt the choice and the burden of the choice that you've made along the way, along your journey, and this game definitely succeeded in that, although it was very difficult to pull off because it's a complex game. It had a lot of quests, a lot of missions, very long game. And then the designers, the quest designers, which are, who are the best of the best in the world, actually needed to control that. So they needed to say, all right, so if you just ignore that guy like few hours before, and then you get into a romantic relationship with this person, a few hours later, then it, somehow intertwines in this aspect of the game, and it gives you some bonus option that you can pursue. Like that was very, very complex. Like I was the producer of the cinematics, or the dialogues and the cinematics of the game. And the dialogues, I guess we had something around 1,500 interactions that you can start. And in each interaction there was a lot of branching of how you could go about your dialogue. So that was very laborious to pull off, and still give value to a lot of those options that you've chose along
How
the way.
many how
So
many years did it take to develop that game, the game that you worked on 3 years? I mean, I'm assuming it built off of game one and game two, but nevertheless, given the complexity you're talking about, and we know games are, a long haul. What was it? What
yeah,
did it take for
absolutely.
something like that?
I don't want to lie because I wasn't at the very beginning of the concept phase of this
Right.
game, but I guess like 5 years.
Wow.
The following title took even more, the Cyberpunk 2077, and it went even further in terms of the consequences and how you behave within the world. So
Has there been
very,
any other
very good.
games that have come along since the Witcher games that have anywhere close to that level of complexity?
Yeah, yeah, especially the Baldur's Gate 3 from last year, launched last year, was a very complex game in this regard. They do it in a bit of a different way. They have their own way, and it's also fantastic. Absolutely. But The Witcher has its own flavor, I guess. So yeah, I really recommend it.
You recommend it? I'm assuming you're not playing that with your son yet.
No, 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 absolutely not.
What has he played? Does he play any games? I mean, he must play certain games on his, or do you allow him to play games?
Yeah, I allow him to play games. I actually he has his own phone on which he cannot call from, but he has some games there. Unfortunately for him, those are only games that I allow, and
Yeah,
those are usually logical games and
yeah.
chess
Oh, good.
and learning words. So,
Okay, good for you. Good for you.
so there are
That's
games that I
yeah,
allow
yeah,
for,
yeah.
an hour while he's playing chess. So like
Yeah, yeah. Well,
that's
yeah, good parenting. Very, very, very good parenting. How about other kinds of games, tabletop games or anything like that? Are you a gaming family across genres
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. We try that as much as we can. Although what I found, especially since I'm working for this industry, is that video games has this advantage that it's oftentimes flashy and very rewarding, and also very helpful in regards to showing you the moves that are allowed and and preventing you from doing something that is not allowed by the game. I'm thinking about chess, for example. So you know, in the on the chessboard, the physical one, you can just do some stuff that is not allowed by the game, but still fun to do
Right.
because you're holding the piece, while in the game it's not allowed. So video game. So I see many advantages of the video game, but still definitely it's something that we tabletop is something that we utilize as well.
And I understand that you lecture quite a bit about game development. How are you in front of an audience when you're, you know, talking to, I'm assuming, students of some sort?
I'm well, right now I feel rather good, especially if prepared. Because I
Yes.
did that for I'm doing that for a few years now. But that was a struggle for me since I'm rather an introvert. Like standing in front of the crowd was always a challenge for me. But and speaking more or less, you know, in a way that you can understand me and not just intertwining with and and everything, and also in English.
Yes,
That's another
exactly.
thing
And a
because it's not my native
native.
tongue. So like, but right now, especially if I'm prepared, not improvising, that's going pretty well, I guess.
I find that what you just said about improvising versus being prepared to be a critical component to speaking in front of a large audience. I did a lot of school visits, and you know, if you're talking to fifth, sixth, or seventh graders, especially fifth or sixth, they're so happy to be out of class, and they're so, you know, they're so eager. So you just start telling them a story. It's great. When you get around eighth graders where they've hit puberty and they're all trying to be cool and they're all chatting and, you know, there's a couple hundred of them, you better be on your game to get them engaged. And if they're not engaged, you better be brave enough to call them out so that the whole hour doesn't, you know, devolve around a couple of kids. Whenever I did school events, it was always the two kids who weren't paying attention that I focused on, not the 100 that were engaged. Like, okay, what's going on with you two? And then I would try and make a joke like, are you guys like, do you guys want to go make out somewhere? And then the audience would laugh and they would be embarrassed and then they would shut up. So,
I wasn't brave enough to actually talk in front of the, you know, younger audience.
oh yeah,
Uh,
well,
so
yeah,
that's
it's a
that's
different,
something that I need to do yet.
it's a different skill set. But lots of times for me, it was they the teachers wanted me to say how many times I had to rewrite my book because their students would write it once and they go, we're done, and they're like, no, you have to rewrite it. They go, I have to rewrite it. And so I would show photographs of all of the notes from my editor, the things they liked and the things they didn't like, and the things they didn't like would be in red. And so the first page there'd be a couple of items in red, and the next page it would be full notes, and they would go, oh, whoa, and I'd say I have to rewrite it like 10 times. And the English teachers they'd come up to me afterwards, thank you so much, thank you.
Yeah.
So it was gratifying, and I just wonder. I imagine it's similar for you when you're lecturing and people are engaged and they're learning something, that it's gratifying.
Yeah, yes, definitely. But when we are talking about, you know, those notes and redoing stuff, like iteration process is also very often used in video games when you're working on each and every aspect of it, and it's always very painful. And one of the qualities or the ways how CD Projekt Red is doing what they're doing is through iterations. And when they were asked in an interview how did they came to such a high quality of their writing and their quests, like they said, like through iterations, it came to, you know, some extremes where some people were working for a year or 2 years on their quests, like the developers, and it got iterated for so long that after a while, actually, ended up not landing in the game. Somebody else took over, iterated on it, and then they released. So you were working for some time, and you're amazed that your work actually haven't made it to the final version. So that's sad, but this is the cost of the quality, I guess, and not looking far enough. Like I've iterated on a trailer for this current game of mine. I think that we are currently on a 22nd iteration or something like that, and I'm getting a feeling from my editor that he's already tired with my notes. So I think we need to be wrapping up.
Well, luckily you pay him, so he has to
Yeah.
he has to continue until you're satisfied. You can just tell him about
Endure.
Steve Jobs. Have him read Steve Jobs' biography, and he'll probably be very happy he has you as a CEO. But yeah, I mean that, in the movie business, that development process is very similar in terms of you're developing and sometimes you overdevelop so much that you don't even remember what the idea that was inspiring it in the beginning, and it turns out to be terrible, and you have to go back, and then you bring in another team and they come back to the beginning, and it's like, hey, that was really good what you had. Like, yeah, we thought so too, but 3 studio regimes later, yeah, it's difficult. But also in redoing things, if there's somebody in charge, if there's one person who is saying, is the general, and they're making the decision, it's when there's a committee that's the problem. I don't mind redoing it over and over if my editors have good notes, but at the end of the day, it's my decision on what the sentence is and what the paragraph is and what the chapter is and what the book is. At the end of the day, I'm imagining you're the one who says, okay, this is good enough, or this is perfect, and let's go put it out there.
Yeah, this is the way how we structured our work at my company. Like I'm a big fan of participatory management style, so that to invite anybody to participate in the process, like regardless of your position in the company. If you just joined and begin your career in video games, or you have been a director in some posh company, like that doesn't matter. Like if you have a good notes or like good ideas, then just bring them up, and hopefully I will see that and use that in the whole process. But yeah, the participation is one thing, and that's cool to have ideas from coming from different directions. But also I do agree with you that there needs to be a person who actually keeps it all together, like a vision holder.
Well, I really appreciate chatting with you today, and I'm including my audience, wish you luck in finishing To the Star, your Alice and Little Prince inspired video game.
Awesome. Thanks for having me today.
It was really fun. And say hi to Gabriel for us here
Thank
in the
you.
States,
Thank you.
okay? Take care. See ya.
I will.
Bye, Stan.
Take care. Bye bye.